Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Write the Damn Book Already. I'm Elizabeth Lyons. I'm a 5-time author, book coach, and founder of Phyllis Press. And in this episode, I want to talk about why you really want to have your book in a bookstore. I also want to clarify that I am such a huge fan and lover of independent bookstores. It really can't even be expressed thoroughly enough. So when I talk about bookstores and it sounds like perhaps I'm being not pejorative, but like I'm trying to talk you out of it, I want to be clear that more often than not, I'm talking about the really, really big guys. The guys that are much more corporate run and things like that. When it comes to indie bookstores, I'm all over it. And I'm all over supporting them. I'm all over being carried by them. I'm all over patronizing them, all of it. And I'm actually going to do an episode, probably 2 or 3 episodes down the road, on how you can work best with indie bookstores, both as an author and as a reader. I frankly hope and plan, I guess, to open one day. So I'm a huge supporter of independent bookstores, and I want to make sure that that's completely clear. The process of getting your books into indie bookstores is different from the big stores, and honestly, it's a little bit easier. It's a win-win oftentimes for you and the indie bookstore, and so I'm certainly going to talk more into that so that you have more of an idea on some creative ways to do that and to work with the booksellers at those stores in order to support them so they can support you. But for the purposes of this episode, I wanted to dive in a little bit more to why you want your book in a bookstore. More often than not, when I work with clients or when I talk to new authors and they say, I want my book in the bookstores, they're not talking about independent bookstores. They're saying, I want it in Barnes & Noble, or I have to think of all the big ones that are here in the States, and the only one that ever really comes to mind that's a conglomerate is Barnes & Noble. But there are, of course, big conglomerate, like there's Target, right? Target has a book section, and people ask, well, how do I get that? Or Costco. People will ask, how do I get that? That's even more of a nightmare. And pretend I didn't say Costco. Let's talk about big warehouses. That's even more of a nightmare than getting into Barnes & Noble in many respects. Because the price cut that they want, as you can imagine, is much bigger. They're buying in a much higher volume. So the risk that you're taking by supplying them is significantly higher. The reason I get the question a lot of times about, for example, Target, is because people see on Instagram or on Facebook or wherever that an author has screenshot their listing on Target.com and said, oh, I'm now available at Target. And while I don't want to burst anyone's bubble, to me, this is kind of like when someone puts an ad on Facebook and says, I made $100,000 off of one ad, and they neglect to report that they spent $95,000 in the ad spend. So they really only made $5,000. And I find it super misleading. And so when people screenshot their book on the Target website and say, I'm now available at Target, they're trying to bolster their positioning and their credibility by being like, oh my God, Target has chosen to carry my book. Sometimes that's true, of course. Many times it's not true. So without getting into the weeds of how it all works, every seller in the world who sells books in some capacity, whether it's a bookstore or there's a bookstore portion of a store like at Target, they all tap into the same database. And so many times it's not that there's a physical person going through every single book that comes available in a week. I don't think a person could even be capable of that, even if they never slept, and saying, oh, we want to carry this. Oh, we want to carry this. Lots of times when you see those posts, if you go out to Target.com and you look up that author, you'll see that the book is listed on the website, but you're not able to order it. Or you're able to order the ebook, but you're not able to order the paperback. So when Target.com, as an example, within a few days of it being listed as available on Target.com, it becomes unavailable. Because the Target database knows that they don't actually sell that product. And so it comes down. And that all happens very much on the back end. Again, there aren't people involved in this. So just keep that in mind. And the only reason that I suggest that you keep it in mind is because, again, it comes down to expectations. When people are like, well, I know somebody who got carried and, is carried by Target. I mean, they may be, but if you don't see their book in your physical Target, because again, they could have just taken their book in, and I've known people who have done this and just taken their book in and put it on the shelf and taken a picture and said, oh my God, Target's carrying my book. And the whole reason that people do this, and the entire reason the majority of people want their book carried in the bookstore, is the following. We tend to believe that it's not really real, meaning it's not a good book unless one of these big guys chooses to pick it up. It's the exact same mentality that causes people to say, well, I'm not going to self-publish and I'm not even going to indie publish. I'm going to wait on a traditional publisher because that means that it's real. It means that it's a real book. Like somebody believed in it other than me and decided to take a chance on it. And this is something that I highly encourage authors to work their way through. Again, it's not about pushing past it or ignoring it or stuffing it in the closet or brushing it under the rug. It's about really thinking through why do I need this? Why do I want this? If you knew that you could be carried by Target and put on one of the end caps and people were going to buy a lot of books, I mean, of course, like most of us would count us in. We're in for this. That's great. But when you understand the ins and outs of the management of that, and especially, in the big box warehouse stores, when it comes down to, you've now got books that are selling on Amazon, for example, for $13.95, but they're selling in the big box warehouse stores for $7.99. That cut comes very much out of the author's paycheck or their royalty statement or their advance ledger. And I remember asking my own distributor about this maybe 10 years ago because I walked into a big box warehouse store and saw all these books and bought a few, of course, and thought, I want to see my book here. And it wasn't that I wanted to see my book there as much as I thought this would be great exposure. It's not that I wanted to see it there. It's that I thought it was a great opportunity for people to be exposed to it and purchase it at a great price. And when my distributor explained to me, he actually said, oh God, Elizabeth, you don't want that. And I said, okay, well, tell me more. And he fully explained to me how, the process of how it actually works. And in the end, it leaves authors feeling anything but, well, it's a real book. Because somebody else believed in it until they didn't. It's very easy in this space and in many other spaces, I'm sure. I mean, I remember I have another podcast, Authors, Creators, and Visionaries, and I interviewed Justin Guarini, and Justin came in second place in the very first American Idol season. Kelly Clarkson was the winner. And Justin tells the story on the podcast, and he's told it in many other places, that the music industry, and he wasn't purposefully dissing the music industry, but much like the publishing industry, he was like, it's just not what people assume. So yes, by winning American Idol, you get $1 million contract, and he got whatever he got for coming in second place. But there are all these things. It's not that all those dollars don't just go into your bank account. There are all these expenses that the record labels claim have to be paid, and all these people who have to be hired, and et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know in the end how much goes into everyone's bank account, certainly. The point is, it's not what people expect. And when Justin tells the story of how he learned by watching SNL. I mean, of all people, it was Tina Fey who made the announcement on the news segment of SNL one night that Justin Guarini had been dropped from his record label, and Justin had no idea. He was never told by anyone at his record label that was going to happen or had happened. He had to learn from Tina Fey on SNL. And so it was, as he explained, his album hadn't performed as well as they had hoped, and so they dropped him. And I'm not suggesting that every record label would do that, nor am I suggesting that every publishing house would do that. I am saying that there are enough instances that I'm aware of, and I'm just a little person over here, of authors who have worked with traditional houses, and when their book didn't sell as well as expected, all of a sudden, all that belief that the publishing house had in you and in your book, it's like poof, gone. And now you're back to wondering, well, do I have a real book now? I mean, you don't have a book now at all, because they're not going to order another print run of that. So it just dies. And so it's really important to be clear about why you want your book in bookstores. For many people, it is the sense of, well, then it makes it a real book. For many people, it's also so it can be an and or situation, a case where they think, well, if it's in bookstores, it's going to sell a lot more. And I talked about that in episode 1. So if instead of recapping here, you can go back and listen to episode 1 about how that all really works and how many books really sell when they're in bookstores. If you get your book into a major bookstore or an indie bookstore, man, be ready, especially with the indies, be ready to promote the daylights out of that indie store and your book, but let people know you can buy my book here at this indie store. I have a newsletter that I just started, and I'll put the link below in the show notes where you can sign up if you'd like. It's once a month, and it's a list of my 5 to 8 or 9 favorite books that I've read ever, or in the last month, or whatever the case may be. And I've said that in the next couple of months, I'm going to start basically support an indie bookstore each month. And so as long as the bookstore carries the particular book that I'm recommending, that's where I'm going to link. Now, people who read the newsletter obviously have the ability to go order the book if they want to from anywhere. But that's what I'm going to be promoting. And when indie stores have carried my book in the past, I have been diligent about promoting not just the fact that my book is at the store, but also you want to support this store, and here's why. Because there are many times no more passionate people on the planet than the owners and the workers of and workers at independent bookstores. So just having your book on the shelf in Barnes & Noble or a big box store or Target.com or an indie bookstore is not going to make it sell. People have to know that you exist, that your book exists, how your book can benefit them, and where they can purchase it. But those are the 2 main reasons that I end up, it's not that I hear them, it's that that's what we end up figuring out. Because whenever someone says to me, well, I really want to be, if we're publishing them through Finn Phyllis Press, or if I'm working with them, or if we're just having a conversation, and they say, but I really want to be carried in bookstores. I just want to see it on a bookstore shelf. Well, if you really just want to see it on a bookstore shelf, then take my advice or my suggestion from episode 2 and just walk into the bookstore and set it on a shelf and take a picture. Even if you just do that and put it as your screensaver on your phone and use that to manifest it happening in real life, that's fine. If that's it, then just do that. More often than not, that's not just it, and because that answer doesn't satisfy people. And so we have to go a little bit more into, okay, why do you really want it to be in there? Well, if it's in there, then it's real. Like it's a good book. It makes it validates it. And the secondary reason is it'll sell more. I'm going to get greater reach and greater exposure. And it's just not true. So those are things that sometimes I wonder if I'm like the negative Nancy of book publishing. And it's so not my intention. There's so much. I got a phone call last night from a client I haven't talked to in years. I was so elated when my phone rang and I saw that it was him. And I answered, and he said, Elizabeth, I just had to call you because, we did this book a couple of years ago, and I really wasn't sure what to do and how to get it out there. And I wasn't completely confident yet in my voice being out there and talking about this topic and on and on. And he said, it's been several years, and I got a call a couple weeks ago, and he was asked to be in a movie, a small, an independent film that was being made about the topic. And he's been asked to speak at different events on things. And I said to him, you realize that this is so beautiful to me because it's been years since the book came out. And the opportunities are still coming. And I'm watching him get more and more confident in, wow, I can speak to this. And I want to speak to this more and more. And the whole thing isn't dead in the water because he has a book that's out of print. He has a book that's very much in print and will be in print as long as he chooses for it to be in print. And it's exciting to me because I see with my own two eyes, and I experience myself as an author, the incredible opportunities that are available having nothing to do with bookstores. So the notion that your book is going to sell more because it's in a bookstore is more often than not a complete fallacy. And when it comes down to it, and people say, I just want my book in fill in the blank bookstore for whatever, if they're just hell-bent on doing it, or if they want, I have clients who want them in independent bookstores because they've been supporting these bookstores, a specific independent bookstore for years, and they've dreamed of seeing their own book on their shelves. We can make that happen. That is happenable. Just made up that word. That is 100% doable. So I'm going to talk about that. I think it's episode 4 or 5. Nope, it's episode 6. I'm going to talk about that in episode 6, is how to work with independent bookstores, any or many or whatever, that you would like to see your book stocked in. How to do that. I fully support it. And we're still talking about just a couple of copies. So we have to remove the idea that it's going to sell millions and millions of copies through being in independent bookstores. But if the goal is to be at an independent bookstore because you love it and you want to support it, we can absolutely do it. So just give that some thought when you think about when you think about, I want to be in a major bookstore. And let me know, send me an email, send me a DM on Instagram, and let me know why you feel like you want to be in bookstores. I'd love to talk about it more and hear about it more so that everyone can win in the space. Everyone can win. That's my goal. Everyone's expectations are set properly and everyone's just enthused and excited about the experience. And in the end, not like, wow, this is not what I expected, because my expectations were never properly set to begin with. So for more and more uplifting resources when it comes to book writing, publishing, and launching, I encourage you to check out my website, elizabethlyons.com. I will see you in the next episode. Write the damn book already.